Welcome to Concept Capsule. Today we will talk about the recent decisions taken by RBI in terms of repo rate, CRR, and also talk about the falling numbers for the GDP. First of all, we need to understand why this decision was taken of unchanged repo rate. At the same time, CRR was brought down from 4.5% to 4%, and how RBI is trying to manage both controlling inflation and sustainable growth. And for this, I have top faculty for economics from InsightsIAS who will be answering these difficult questions for all the aspirants. Welcome to the show, sir. And first question, and very straightforward question, sir. I also want to understand what is MPC, what is repo rate. Let's start with this, sir.
So, as you mentioned, it is not a difficult question at all. It is economics, I believe it is more of a commonsensical.
Okay.
If you show enough interest towards it. As you rightly told, yes, recently RBI concluded a meeting, that is fifth bi-monthly meeting
Right.
for a financial year 25,
Absolutely.
which is called monetary policy meeting. So, when you ask me what is MPC, Monetary Policy Committee, that we expand it as, it is earlier it evolved like an MOU between government and RBI. To formulate monetary policy, which is one of the important policies apart from fiscal policy, to bring out the economic well-being of the country. So monetary policy is the domain of RBI. And later on, it took a statutory backing by the Finance Act 2016 by amending RBI Act 1934. If I can recollect properly, it is Section 45Z, something which talks about Monetary Policy Committee. Correct. Of RBI Act 1934. Right, sir. So to just be brief about MPC, for factual understanding of MPC, it constitutes 6 members. Out of that, the chairman of the MPC would be the governor of RBI, and then there will be deputy governor who is also a member, deputy governor who is in charge of monetary policy, right, and one more member is recommended by the RBI board of directors. So other 3 members are nominated by the government. So it will be a 6-member committee. Apart in the 6-member committee, decisions are taken on the basis of majority. That is, recently the decision is taken in the 4:2 ratio.
The recent decision was 4:2.
4:2. Right. And then, so there is no veto power for chairman of the committee, as we say, governor of RBI. But in case of tie, he will have a casting power. He can vote, the casting vote that we call, and based on the decision will be taken. And if you go much deeper, the quorum of the meeting should be at least 4 members should be present in the meeting. And the meeting usually happens bi-monthly basis, and that's the basics about monetary policy committee. When you come to the recent decision that is taken, as you rightly said, yes, repo rate is unchanged, 6.5%. So if you see the previous meetings also, for 11th time the repo rate is kept unchanged. Right. Okay, it's a tough decision to make because we are expecting India to grow to achieve double-digit growth. But last year it was very impressive. We achieved 8.2% growth. Yes. But recently we are facing 2 issues, which is of higher inflation and reducing GDP growth. And maybe we are at the verge of stagflation. Stagflation is a situation where we achieve lower rate of growth and with a higher rate of inflation. So now both RBI and government has a tough task to manage both inflation and growth rate. Hence RBI is being very cautious. The recent policy decision, we call it as a neutral policy stance. In technical terms, we call it as neutral policy stance, where RBI is not skeptical about having higher inflation. It is neither skeptical or optimistic about the GDP growth. Correct. So that is why it kept the rates unchanged. What signals does it convey? Unchanged rate. Right. So to take the previous numbers, let's say, to put the basics across, what is the role of MPC? MPC role mainly is to manage the inflation.
Benchmark rate.
So that is the first intention of RBI, the Monetary Policy Committee. And second intention is to cooperate with the government to bring about a stable growth rate or to a progressive growth rate. So both the situations are taken into consideration when they decide to unchange the repo rate. So when you talk about inflation, RBI has estimated the inflation. It actually increased the estimation of inflation for financial year 25, which is 24-25. It was earlier projected to be 4.5%. Now RBI is saying it may go up to 4.8%. So RBI is more skeptical about inflation may go high. There are many reasons for inflation. You know, right? Russia-Ukraine war is happening, supply chain is disrupted.
Geopolitical tensions and lot of
Yeah.
things.
So RBI is very cautious about it. And recently, the October figures for inflation is not impressive.
Yes.
It breached 6%. It became 6.2%, which is very concerning. So it becomes a responsibility for RBI to make sure that inflation rate are not breached. So that is why it did not reduce the repo rate.
So, if I may, so that means that RBI is on a very tight rope when it comes to managing the inflation rate and sustainable high growth.
Yes, because I told you, stagflation is very costly for India to take
Right.
at this point of time. Okay, so because we have to reap the demographic dividend. So now, if you have to face the situations as we faced in 2008, which is of double-digit inflation, which is going to be very difficult.
Correct.
That too, we are just recovering from the corona crisis. So that is why RBI was very cautious to not to reduce the repo rate. Reducing repo rate, again for basics, reducing repo rate will increase the liquidity,
Right.
and then it will pump more money into the market.
Yes.
More money means more buying power. That is pull inflation. Again, the inflation rates will be very high. So RBI is not going to reduce the repo rate.
Just to add, what sir is trying to tell is that the repo rate is that interest rate the commercial banks would be borrowing money from the RBI, and this is the interest rate being charged by the RBI. If the interest rate reduces, more amount of money can be infused in the economy. That is exactly what the sir is trying to say. So one thing which I want to understand is that we talk about this COVID growth rate of 8.2%. Is it correct? Because that was the untamed growth which could not happen in COVID, and the numbers went high. Is it correct to match this year's growth rate with the COVID growth?
No. We don't want to match it. No. That is base effect we have.
Okay.
We call it as a base effect.
Right.
If you match the COVID, GDP is all about relative.
Right.
How much we grew compared to the last year.
Right.
So we already come out of that crisis. Right. We are no more comparing our figures with the COVID growth rate.
Right.
We're not doing that.
Right.
What I meant to say is the situation prevailed in the COVID have not bettered in many areas. For example, if you talk about tourism sector, it was totally disrupted. We are still picking up from there, right? Especially manufacturing sector, especially automobile sector.
Yes, I was about to ask this.
Yeah, so we are still recovering. In this phase of growth, RBI cannot afford to increase the repo rate, right? So that is why it kept it very stable.
Right.
And as I told you, as you rightly said, repo rate is the rate charged by the RBI for the commercial banks who want to borrow money from the RBI for a shorter period of time.
Right.
We call it as overnight borrowing.
Right.
And to extend beyond that, we call it as a Liquidity Adjustment Facility,
Yes.
LAF.
Yes.
So yeah, that is about basics about it. I talked about inflation. Next part of the repo rate decision is GDP. So that is also one of the significant factors which decides the GDP, because more money available with a lesser interest rate will pump in more money for credit.
Right. Loans, etc.
Flow of, the investors will have money at a cheaper cost to invest.
Yes.
Right. So if RBI increases the repo rate, the credit will become very costlier. Investors will not have enough money to invest in the market. So that is why RBI is become very cautious not to increase the repo rate. If it decreases the repo rate, it will pump in more money, it will create more inflationary pressure.
Sir, on this only I want to add and ask you something. This problem I understood, but this one important problem which many reports have said, that urban spending has reduced, that is the inflation is increasing, but the wages are not increasing. That also is is one of the reasons for less GDP growth rate.
Less GDP growth rate is again, it doesn't depend on one particular phenomenon.
Is this one of the reasons for it, sir?
It can be the reason. It can be, but it depends on a lot of other things.
Right.
It also depends on the global geopolitics, right? Foreign investments, how much foreign investment we are able to attract.
Right.
Only even those things also under the consideration.
All over.
Oh. And how geopolitically are we stable? And protectionism thing that is happening in the USA.
Right.
Now foreign investors are being afraid to mobilize their finances across the borders. So that is why every country is becoming more cautious. That is why even investors are afraid to pump in more money into the economy. They are in the wait and watch mode. That is why RBI is also not so skeptical about growth rate as well as not so skeptical about inflation rate. That is why they managed to bring a neutral policy stance. Again, RBI is in the position of
they did reduce the CRR. What do you think that would be the impact?
Yeah, that's a good point. Cash reserve ratio, which is a tool that is there with the MPC to manage the liquidity in the market.
Right.
So more CRR. Actually, CRR means proportion or percentage of the money of net time and demand liabilities of a government of the bank to be kept with the RBI in terms of cash.
Correct.
So RBI reduced the CRR from 4.2 to 4%. That will pump in more than 1.5 lakh crore rupees of money into the market. The idea behind reducing CRR is, as I told you, we have to push the growth.
Correct.
We cannot compromise the investors' sentiments. If there is more money into the market, banks will be readily giving out the credit. Credit inflow must not stop. It should create it. Not reducing the repo rate should not create a liquidity crunch in the market. To avoid the situation of liquidity crunch, the RBI has to find out some ways and mechanisms to improve liquidity flow in the market. That is why RBI has reduced the CRR from 4.5 to 4%. That's a good stand, but again, it depends on how efficient the banks are, what are the credit channelizing mechanisms, how efficient they are. Again, it depends on those things.
And most importantly, the benefit of that money which they are getting, will it be pushed evenly in the economy? That also depends on the buck which you are seeing.
Exactly. And one more thing, CRR sends a positive note that says we are not afraid of unstable geopolitics. We believe in our economy. More money doesn't necessarily translate into more inflation. Our economy is healthy enough to take care of the money and invest in the good ways. That means in the manufacturing sector or to productive manner. That shows RBI is more confident. Though we are not reducing the repo rate, but still we are confident about our GDP. We can release more money into the market, and that money is channeled into better means of investment. NIP, National Investment Pipeline, which is expecting 111 lakh crores of money. If you are so optimistic, if you are aiming to become fourth largest economy in the coming days, if you are aiming to become developed economy by 2040, without channelizing enough money, we cannot dream of achieving that. In that way, CRR, reducing CRR is a cautious move and supportive move.
Sir, this would be my final question. It's on that. Even China is not able to achieve their growth targets. So is this a global phenomena or is it only towards India?
So China it had reaped its demographic dividend much before India.
Yes.
Right, because they pitched into the manufacturing sector while India is able to survive with the service sector.
Right.
Now more than 90%, even America, which is staunch opponent of Chinese economy, especially if you take apparel sector, more than 90% of the apparel industry or the products that have been sold in America is from China. China is not bothered about capturing the global market, but India is bothered about it. Because India is a vastly import dependent country. We have manufacturing sector mostly in the assembly area, not in the design and manufacturing area. China is not worried about it. Whoever captures the market, they can change the market to their advantage. But India is not so strong power in the economics. So it is more worry for India than China.
Okay. So you mean to say this is not globally, it's right now India should not be bothered about globally what countries are going and focus more internally and domestically?
India has to be bothered about global scenario because see, federal policy change, rates have been changed. They have reduced it.
Right.
That
you're America, you're talking
American
about
Federal Bank. It has to be cautious about what other central banks are doing. Of course, India is doing that. What I'm telling you is reduced GDP growth of China is not as much as a concern about as compared to reduced growth rate of India. Because India is yet to capture the global market. We are still in the nascent stage of capturing the global market, reaping our demographic dividend. We are still trying to capture the advantage of demographic dividend. We are still struggling, limping towards it.
Correct, because sir, even with such a slow growth rate in China, they're still able to put a stimulus of $1 trillion.
Exactly.
That's their strength.
Exactly.
So they might have, the money might be less, but deep pockets are still there.
Yes, sir. And they have other means of nasty means. Trump calls it a nasty means of reducing the currency value, making the exports cheaper, which India cannot resort to. We have to find a
deliberate devaluation.
Yeah. So India cannot resort to such means. We have to find a disciplined way of economic growth.
So you also brought Trump. You also brought tariffs. You also brought then eventually de-dollarization. That would be something we'll talk about in the next session. And I hope sir has answered the important questions related to MPC, questions related to repo rate, reverse repo rate. And if you want that certain questions more to be answered related to economics, put them in the comment section. We'll take them in the concept capsule and get answers from Ganesh sir again. So in the next session, we'll talk about Trump's de-dollarization. And when he keeps saying, I'll put tariff 25%, 66%, what is this tariff warfare which Trump is talking about and what would be its impact on America and the world? So in the next session, we'll meet up again. Thank you, Ganesh sir, for answering these very important questions. And I hope you did enjoy the session.